Other news, our unemployment rate dropped by just 0.2%. It now stands at 32.7% in the last 3 months of last year. The increase in the number of people working has been driven by activity in the finance, private households and trade sectors. The new figures show a tiny improvement. Some parts of the economy are now recovering to pre-COVID levels. And Tokozo Kumalo spoke to the Statistician General, Risenga Malaleke.
One of the things that we are seeing is that our economy coming out of COVID-19 is showing a recovery. So we're seeing a post-COVID-19 recovery in that in the second quarter of 2020, our real economy was sitting at less than $1 trillion, about 920 billion. But now in the third quarter of 2022, we're sitting at 1.161 trillion. So we are seeing a recovery, and that recovery is actually surpassing even pre-COVID times, but that is from the side of the economy. And we can only say from those that are commentators that an economy that is recovering will start to generate jobs.
Now, despite obviously the huge crisis within unemployment is youth unemployment, and we did see a dent in the drop in the number there. What are some of the insights we can take out of that? Because, you know, analysts and experts who deal with youth unemployment, their concern being young people, especially graduates, might be getting those jobs, but they're often seasonal contract work that are internships that are not long-term employments. Are there any insights that we can get from that drop in youth unemployment from Q3 to Q4?
Firstly, according to the International Labour Organization, we are advised that as long as people can work, whether it's short term, if they can work for an hour a day, they are actually working. But now specifically to youth unemployment is that young people, especially those in ages 15 to 24, remain vulnerable to labour markets. Their unemployment rate is sitting at 61%. So are women. Their unemployment rate is generally higher than that of males. But particularly black African women, their unemployment rate is sitting at about 39.6%, which is far higher than the national unemployment rate of 32.7%.
Well, let's get a take on the jobless numbers. Trevor Shaku is the spokesperson of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. Trevor, good afternoon to you and thank you for your time. We're correctly focused on unemployment much of the time, but we have a large number, very few millions of people who are working, and yet the amount of money that they receive just isn't going far enough. How difficult is it for people who are earning money, but actually fine, they aren't earning enough to keep themselves and their families?
Thank you, Steve, for having us. It has become very difficult for majority of the working class in this country, who 70% of whom constitute a group of workers who are not earning or who are not earning more than 5,900. This is statistics which was released, I think, last year. We showed that out of the 14 million at the time, or 15 million at the time, the more than 11 million of them were earning less than 5,900. Now, this has become very tough for them, especially because there is a rising cost of living. And what it takes to produce a worker is actually the very necessities of life that a worker requires. That is your electricity, that is your water and refuse, that is your shelter, that is your food, that is your transport and fuel. And all of these things have skyrocketed in the era where the wages of workers have been to a large extent not been growing in real terms. The statistics produced by the International Labour Organization showed that the global wage growth in real terms had actually declined by 0.7. And this follows a decline in the previous year. And we might see further declines in the future, especially now that we see the interest rates. Most central banks across the world have raised interest rates, and inflation across the world actually was at high levels. Actually, some of these central banks, or all of them, have raised these interest rates as a way of trying to fight the very inflation. Of course, We differed with them in the method they deployed to fight interest rates. But the combination of both interest rates and the living costs have actually made the life and the affordability of necessities very, very, very difficult for our workers.
Trevor, we also see businesses, and I think government, certainly government, but also businesses, offering lower than inflation increases for workers. Now, I think both government and businesses will say they simply have no choice. They don't want to do that. I mean, you would think that a business doesn't want its workers to get poorer. You'd like to hope that that's the case, and neither does government. They say they simply can't afford more. But I don't know, can you force people to offer you bigger increases? I know there are some strikes on the horizon.
Indeed, that is the plane of what we call the class strike. It is where workers must, as an organized, a unified force, come to bargain and fight for a bigger share of the surplus value which is produced by their own labor power. But let me give you two things which, in our view, underpins the failure of government from increasing the wages of workers, but also the private sector. The private sector is mainly driven by profit. And as a result, it is refusing to give these workers so that they can continue to record a lot of profit for their own shareholders. This is the guiding principle for the private sector after all. They produce commodities with the sole intention of making profit. But government, on the other hand, and the very reason why it is adamant to impose a below inflation increase on the wages of public servants, the public servants in the public service, but also the workers in local government, is as a result of the policies which they've taken from a monetarist point of view. So according to the monetarist approach which the Central Bank of South Africa, the South African Reserve Bank, is following, unfortunately, is that they must fight inflation. And the way they fight inflation is coming from a premise that says that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. That is, it arises from an excessive supply of money, and the target of the South African Reserve Bank is therefore to reduce that money in order to reduce aggregate demand. And what they have done, this is in coordination, of course, with Treasury. So there's a coordination between monetary policy and fiscal policy. So they have, through that particular coordination, South African Reserve Bank has influenced the Treasury, the Finance Department, not to increase the wages of workers with above inflation increases, because according to them, that would be detrimental to their fight against inflation.
Trevor, I'm afraid we are going to have to leave it there, although I'd love to argue with you about monetary policy again. Trevor Shaku, thank you.